To kick off this episode, we have announcing the Swift SDK for Android. Now, we did talk about this a couple episodes back when it was first in very early beta, because remember, this is all open source, but now it is officially released. It says, today we are pleased to announce nightly preview release of the Swift SDK for Android. So what does this mean? Well, big picture, and I'll oversimplify it here, is that you can now have your business logic, your models, any algorithms all written in Swift, and then using this Swift to Java project, you can interoperate between Java and Swift. So now, again, all the models, all your business logic can be in Swift, and then now you just have to build your UI natively in SwiftUI or Jetpack Compose or whatever you're building for the Android. So all your business logic can be shared, written in Swift, and then you just have to handle the UI for each platform. So we're not fully all native Android apps in Swift, not fully there yet. And from what I've read, getting there one day where you can build the UI natively in Swift, not impossible, but that is definitely going to be a very heavy lift. So not sure if that day will come, but getting your business logic, being able to be shared between your iOS app and your Android app is a huge step. And if you are interested in utilizing this, there's a getting started guide here. You click that link, and then there's also this vision document here for what the direction of the Android workgroup sees for this. Again, this is the very first release. This is the very beginning. This is going to grow and improve over time. So you can click on this vision document, and it is the GitHub repo. Again, all this is open source. You can see the vision document file here. Use cases for Swift on Android. I'll make this bigger because it's probably small here. The main one, like I said, shared business logic. Down here you see full native applications. While requiring significant effort for the UI, it's conceivable to build entire Android applications in Swift using platform native UI frameworks for each respective OS. So yeah, if you want to see the general direction on where Swift for Android is going, check out this vision document. And like I said, remember, this is the very beginning. This is the very first step. It was just announced. So my assumption is this is only going to improve and get better over time. If you want to go deeper with me into Swift, SwiftUI, building apps, I have a variety of courses available at seanisland.teachable.com. I also offer my source code for all my YouTube tutorials and all my courses, because I know some people like, just give me the code, right? I don't need to watch all your videos. I just want to look at the code. So I have that available as well. And if you like, you can book a call with me to discuss anything iOS dev related, Swift code, SwiftUI, building apps, career questions, AI, content creation, pretty much anything you want within the realm of iOS development. You can check all that out at seanisland.teachable.com. Link is in the description. Next up, I want to share the Shipaton 2025 winners. If you're not familiar with what Shipaton is, it's a yearly, well, I think yearly, it's only the second year they've done it. I assume they're going to do it every year because it's been a huge success, where RevenueCat hosts a virtual hackathon. Like this year, they got over 812 projects. And in this blog post, they share the winners. Big grand prizes for the winners, and on Times Square, that big billboard in Times Square, you get your app up there. That's pretty cool. As you can see on the left, there's the Build in Public Award, there's the grand prize, there's the Ham Award, RevenueCat Design Award, all different kinds of categories on what you get awarded for. And it's a very long blog post that gives, screenshots and a brief description of what each winning app is. So the reason I wanted to share this was to give you ideas and inspiration. You can scroll through here, because what I like, this is the Build in Public Award, so you can see how they were sharing their progress on X. And then there's all kinds of videos where you can see how they're explaining their app, how they're marketing their app. There's some good marketing videos down here as well. So again, I wanted to share this to give you inspiration, whether it's design, you liked how they laid out a certain type of screen, or maybe just the idea for the app. Now, of course, don't blatantly rip off the app, but maybe you see an app and you're like, oh, I like that idea. However, I have my own spin. I would do this very differently. And maybe that gives you inspiration to build. So like I said, super long blog post going through all the winners. Definitely check it out if you're looking for inspiration for your next app. And one more thing from RevenueCat, because October was their huge month. They have Shipaton, and then they do their App Growth Annual in New York City, their conference. And what I'm sharing here is that all the conference talks are now available on YouTube. So you can see lessons in value creation at Duolingo. You can see how Ladder became the #1 grossing fitness app. So if you're building a fitness app, I'm sure you could learn a thing or two from there. 5 app monetization trends for 2025. Roast my paywall, quick wins to boost conversion. So if you're building your own app, whether you're a full-blown indie dev or you're just building a side project, I'm sure there's plenty to learn from these videos. Moving on, we have the SwiftUI scroll performance, the 120 FPS frames per second challenge by Jacob Bartlett. If you're not familiar with Jacob, he has very in-depth technical articles. I always love reading them, and he always implements humor. I don't know, maybe we have similar humor, but I always get a laugh out of every article. And he just went indie. This is what he's doing full time now. So go ahead, subscribe, give him some support there. But basically what this article goes through is how to improve scroll performance in SwiftUI. If you've been building with SwiftUI for a while, you know that's a common issue once your app gets to a certain size. You have a very long list, a very large scroll view, performance tends to be an issue. So he really dives into this here. And here's an example of the humor. SwiftUI is like magic, but like all well-designed magic systems, it comes with a cost. What, you thought that beautiful declarative syntax and automatic data bindings come for free? Think again. Swift's pesky memory safety mechanism put it at a performance disadvantage compared to unsafe languages like C and C++. In the same way, Swift's beautiful reactive data flow gobbles CPU cycles like an Ozempic patient at the hot dog eating contest. That made me laugh. And he talks about, if you want that 120 refresh rate, you have 8.3 milliseconds to avoid a frame drop, the dreaded hitch, as he says. And he says there's system overhead, so you're probably only going to get about 5 milliseconds to do that work. So that's why to get that buttery smooth 120 hertz scrolling, you really got to pay attention to performance if you have a really long list or your cells in the list are pretty complicated. So he sets up a project, and this is what I like about Jacob's articles, is that he goes in depth, like showing the instruments of the app and all the performance. So he set up a sample project with a picture, a gradient, a blur, animated timer. So he made his cell like kind of medium complex, nothing insanely complex, but it's also not just a very simple, image and text, right? There's some stuff going on here. So that's what he set up for the experiment. And then he goes through VStack, lazy VStack, and scroll view, right? It's the typical choices you have, even though it's really between lazy VStack and list. Because if you know anything about VStack, right, if you're loading 1,000 cells, that's going to load all at once, and that's going to be very slow performance, loading 1,000 cells all at one time. He even says that here. If this isn't your first rodeo, you might predict what happens. But again, he goes into instruments, he still profiles it, he lays it out, he shows you where the issue is and where the performance bottlenecks are. So we'll skip over VStack because that's obvious. But the lazy VStack versus list, again, he does the same thing. He has this experiment and he tries different things. So for example, with lazy VStack, he said it performed well, except when you needed dynamically sizing cells. So this is the normal performance. Here's how well it did. Again, the instruments trace goes very technical, very in-depth. That's why I like it. It's not just surface level stuff. But he says on lazy VStack, when you do dynamically sized cells, and here you can see he's changing the frame size like randomly per cell, that's when you saw performance drops. Whereas list, we go down here, list handled that mostly fine. There was a couple frame drops, but nowhere near what you had with the lazy VStack. And he says about list. Now let's come to the Elvis of SwiftUI containers, the list. It's so good, it's almost like using UIKit. Well, because it totally is UIKit. It's UI collection view under the hood. So that's why it performs so well. Now, the typical trade-off with lazy VStack or list is lazy VStack, like we just showed. The performance is fine unless you're doing dynamically resizing cells, then you probably want to go to a list, but you get a lot more customization with lazy VStack. You can use all kinds of scroll view transitions that were introduced in iOS 17 and more in iOS 18, whereas list is more performant, but it's more stringent on how you can customize it. But you also get built-in swipe to delete, you get built-in reordering, so it's always a trade-off. There's no one right answer, but reading this article, you will understand those trade-offs better. And he does finish off with some performance recommendations, no matter what you're doing. Going further with performance. If you have images, use image caching, use pagination. There's a big one that anyone can do, like minimize redraws. This has to do with how big your actual SwiftUI view is, like maybe that cell. He says you want to minimize dependencies in your views. Your SwiftUI view should have as little state as possible, which means fewer recomputations and less redrawing. Obviously, the more you're redrawing it, the more you're apt to have performance issues. So if you're having issues with your scroll view, whether it's a lazy VStack or a list, and you really want to dive in, check out this article. Again, all of Jacob's articles are crazy in depth. Again, you bust out the instruments, bust out the memory usage. If you really want to go deep into the weeds, Jacob's articles are awesome. And again, he just went indie, give him some support. Next up, we have the Q&A from the Foundation Models Code Along. If you're not familiar, Apple actually did a code along on YouTube, like a live stream where they're coding using foundation models, and they walk you through building a basic app using the basics of foundation models. Now, this is kind of rare for Apple to do a live stream, live coding. This is some new thing they did. So definitely watch it. It is an hour and 45 minutes long, so it might take you a little bit if you're interested in foundation models. But at the end of this video, there was a Q&A if you watched it live. However, that's not part of the YouTube video that is the VOD, the video on demand. You had to be there live for the Q&A. But Anton here was a mensch and gathered the Q&A into a blog post so that if you missed it live, you still get it. And now what this is just that Q&A from that live stream. And there is a ton of questions. I'm scrolling through fast just to show you. All right, I'm not gonna read all the questions and answers. It is probably 100 questions and answers, which is awesome that the Apple developers sat there and like answered these questions in the live stream. So if you are in the weeds building an app using foundation models and you have like maybe a niche question, something that isn't covered in the WWDC videos or something that's not covered as part of the basics, you really want to get into the weeds, I'm sure you'll find something nice in this Q&A. For example, does the context limit also include the description provided by the tool and the tool's response? Is the tool's response included in the context limit? So if you don't know, this on-device foundation model has a pretty small context size of 4,000 tokens. And that includes your prompt any instructions you include. That also, as we're finding out here, if you're using a tool, which is a tool is how you go like make an API call. Maybe you want to get the weather or the latest sports scores that you want to feed into your model. Well, whatever that API response is counts in the context limit, as we're seeing here. So you're gonna get a lot of situational questions. And again, there's probably, I didn't count them, I would guess 100 questions here. What is the estimated efficiency of the pre-warm? So you can pre-warm your model. So part of the performance of getting the response, if you just press, give me my response. Well, the model has to load and warm up, and then it does a response. Well, if you know the user's gonna press response on a screen, you can pre-warm the model. And it says, okay, what is the performance gains? For the case where the model wasn't already in memory, you're just loading it from scratch, a pre-warm can easily save 500 milliseconds, which is half a second, which is pretty big performance gain. So if you can, you wanna pre-warm your model. But again, you're gonna get this kind of information on like how much a pre-warm can save from this Q&A. So again, lots of questions. If you're deep into the weeds on foundation models, I think you're gonna find some value here. And if you are a beginner and haven't used foundation models yet, this code along walks through the very basics of using foundation models, and it's straight from the source, Apple developers. Moving on, we have iPhone 17 screen sizes from the Use Your Loaf blog. They do this every year, and you don't always necessarily need to know the exact pixels of the iPhone 17 Pro, the iPhone 17 Air, the iPhone 17 Pro Max, because they are all slightly different, right? 6.3, 6.9, 6.5 inches, and that leads to different pixels, whether that's the screen resolution or the native resolution. But sometimes you do need to know the iPhone 17 Pro is 874 points tall. Sometimes you do need that. A nice one to know is like how big the status bar is and the bottom safe area is, 34 points. 62 points. So yeah, if you really need some in-depth detail on the dimensions of all the new iPhone 17s, whether it's the Pro Max, the Air, all that stuff, Use Your Loaf has got you covered, and they do this every year for every iPhone model. So it's always a great resource. Next up, we have text concatenation versus text interpolation in SwiftUI. Now this article is actually from April, so this is before iOS 26 and WWDC. And the reason this is a big deal now is because this text concatenation, I'm sure you've done this, where you just add a little plus sign to add different text. That way you can format different text, right? You see tortilla chips with spicy and spicy's in red. Well, this is actually deprecated in iOS 26 if you are concatenating text like this, which this has been how you did things since the beginning of SwiftUI. So I'm sure if you have an older code base, this is everywhere in your code base if you did this kind of thing. And this is the way we did it for the most part up until iOS 26, where it's now deprecated. So how do you fix this? What do you do? And why is this deprecated now? If we've done this since day one, like what's the problem? Well, the problem lies in localization. So localization treats each of these strings as a separate thing, which may seem fine, like cool, yeah, just translate it as is. But what you realize is, she says it down here, different languages sometimes order things differently. For example, in French, adjectives usually follow the noun, whereas in English, the adjective is before the noun. So what you'll find as your app is being translated into all these languages, sometimes the structure of the sentence will change, like the order of the words. And when you concatenate your text like this up here, you really limit the translator's ability to move things around because these are treated as 3 different strings in the localized strings file. So that's a big reason why this has been deprecated, and moving on to, like, what is the fix for this? Well, you use text interpolation. So you have your text here, and then you just interpolate a new text, just like you were interpolating like an int or a double into a string. You do that with a new text, and then now you style it how you like. And you can probably refactor this out into its own view to make that a little cleaner, but it renders the same. And in the string catalog, it now adds a placeholder here, which gives the translator flexibility to move things around. So now if they need to reorder the sentence to make it make sense in that language, they now have the flexibility to do that. And like I said, the reason I wanted to share this was because this is how we broke up a string and styled different words in the string, basically since day one of SwiftUI. So I'm sure this is all over people's code bases, and now it needs to be changed, and this article shows you how to do it. That wraps it up for this episode of Swift News. See you in the next one.